again, Year 11. So these questions should be super easy for you to answer now because we've spent the whole week concentrating on this question. So what does question 4 require you to do? How many marks are available for it? And how long have you got to respond? 5 minutes to answer those questions. Okay then, so last lesson we had a read of Jamaica Inn and we thought about what was happening in the text, who the main characters were and how they felt about the event that they were taking part in. So today we're going to have a look at the question and we're going to have a look for some quotations that we could use from the text to answer the question. So the first thing you need to do is you need to copy out the complete question into your book, please. I know it's not ideal for you to copy, however, we haven't got printers at the moment and I can't send these out to you, so it is just a little bit more writing for you to do. So focus this part of your answer on the second part of the source from lines 19 to the end. So you need to make sure that you are only quoting from lines 19 to the end. You cannot quote from anywhere else in the source because obviously it will not be relevant to the question if you quote from anywhere else. The second part, a student having read this section of the text said the writer brings the very different characters to life for the reader. It is as though you are inside the coach with them. So this is the statement. We spent the whole first lesson having a look at being able to pick out the important parts of the question. The statement is the most important part. It's the thing that you've got to use to find your evidence, okay? So this is a very important section. And then finally, it gives you these bullet points to remind you as to what you should be doing. The idea is you should be finding evidence to support the statement and justifying what you've said, okay? So based on this then, so the writer brings the very different characters to life for the reader. It is as though you're inside the coach. What two things do we need to find quotations about? Okay, so the first thing we need to find quotations about is the lifelike characters, okay? So what kind of details do we learn about the characters that make them seem realistic, okay? Looks like I'm a 4-year-old writing here, doesn't it? It's really hard to do it with my board. And then finally, it is as though you are inside the coach with them. So are there any quotations that make it feel like you are inside the quote with them? Inside the coach even, not the quote. So those are the two things you are going to look through the extract for, okay? So the extract is on the next slide. Obviously, you're not going to be able to print out the extract. You are going to have to write any quotations into your book and then write your thoughts around them. It should take you around about 10 minutes to read through the source again and pick out relevant quotations. So pause me and move on to the next slide and obviously have a read of the text yourself and see if you can pick out any quotations. So anything that makes the characters feel lifelike and anything that makes you feel like you're inside the coach with them. So what I'll do is I'll just read this out for you in case you're somebody who struggles to read it, okay? But remember, you've got to pick out 3 quotations that either show the lifelike characters or that you feel like you're inside the coach with them. So the few passengers huddled together for warmth, exclaiming in unison when the coach sank into a heavier rut than usual, and one old fellow, who had kept up a constant complaint ever since he had joined the coach at Truro, rose from his seat in a fury, and fumbling with the window sash let the window down with a crash, bringing a shower of rain upon himself and his fellow passengers. He thrust his head out and shouted up to the driver, cursing him in a high, petulant voice for a rogue and a murderer, that they would all be dead before they reached Bodmin if he persisted in driving at breakneck speed. They had no breath left in their bodies as it was, and he, for one, was never going to be travelling by coach again. Whether the driver heard him or not was uncertain. It seemed more likely that the stream of reproaches was carried away in the wind, for the old fellow, after waiting a moment, put up the window again, having thoroughly chilled the interior of the coach, and setting himself once more in his corner, wrapped his blanket around his knees and muttered into his beard. His nearest neighbour, a jovial, red-faced woman in a blue cloak, sighed heavily in sympathy, and with a wink to anyone who might be looking and a jerk of her head towards the old man, she remarked for at least the 20th time that it was the dirtiest night she ever remembered, and she had known some, that it was proper old weather, and no mistaking it for the summer this time, and burrowing into the depths of a large basket, she brought out a great hunk of cake and plunged into it with strong white teeth. Mary Ellen sat in the opposite corner, where the trickle of rain oozed through the crack in the roof. Sometimes a cold drip of moisture fell upon her shoulder, which she brushed away with impatient fingers. She sat with her chin cupped in her hands, her eyes fixed on the window splashed with mud and rain, hoping with a sort of desperate interest that some ray of light would break the heavy blanket of sky, and but a momentary trace of that lost blue heaven that had mantled Helford yesterday's shine for an instant as a forerunner of fortune. So you should be picking out some quotations now on your own from there. So 3 quotations, either that show that the characters are lifelike or that you feel like you are inside the coach with them. Okay, so hopefully you're giving yourself some time to pick out some quotations and you've had a think about what might potentially be suggesting that obviously these people aren't enjoying their journey that they've been on. So I'm just going to go through some quotations now just to give you a hand, okay? So the first thing that I think you need to focus on is obviously these really in-depth explanations that they give us of the characters, okay? So when we think about the old fellow for starters, so he has been constantly complaining ever since he joined the coach, okay? He gets up from his seat in a fury and fumbling with the window sash lets the window down with a crash, bringing in a shower of rain upon himself and his fellow passengers. So in terms of a lifelike character, old man, stereotypical. Complaining about the journey, stereotypical. Gets up from his seat in a fury thinking that telling somebody off is going to make a difference, stereotypical. And then he pulls down the window, not considering the other passengers around him, and lets in the cold wind. So in terms of lifelike, we understand this character. We've probably seen him a couple of times before ourselves, and obviously is very angry about the situation that he's in. So then he shouts up to the driver, cursing him in a high, petulant voice for a rogue and a merger. Petulant essentially meaning like it's annoying. He keeps doing it over and over again. Okay? So, and this idea of him shouting, you're a rogue, you're a murderer, again makes it more lifelike. We know exactly what he's saying. So in terms of a lifelike character, we see him. We then see him kind of recoil. So once he doesn't get a response, he moves back into his corner and wraps himself up in his blanket. And mutters into his beard. So it suggests that he's not happy with the way that the situation has ended, and obviously he is now going back to his current situation. He's got a blanket to keep him warm and he's going to sit there and continue to chunter away to himself. So there's lots of quotations there that explain quite a lot about the old man, and we learn quite a lot about him. This line here then, his nearest neighbour, I think that kind of puts me into the coach, because I'm thinking, right, the old man is now in the corner with his blanket on. Next to him is this jovial red-faced woman, okay? And this idea of being red-faced and the fact that she's sighing heavily could potentially suggest that maybe she's not very healthy. So she's breathing, she's quite out of breath from what's happening, okay? And obviously she's looking over at the old man and she's kind of making fun out of him, which tells us quite a lot about her. And then this idea that she then goes into a large basket and brings out a hunk of cake kind of feeds into that idea earlier that maybe she's not as healthy as she could be. But it also makes us think that perhaps she's kind of a comfort eater. So she feels that it's the dirtiest night she's ever been on. She's upset about what's just happened with the gentleman previously. So she brings out the cake to obviously make herself feel better. Yeah, so again, we're learning a lot about these characters from only a short kind of display of what happens. And then Mary Ellen, the fact that they use her name obviously makes me feel like I know her now, I know her name, I know what she's about. And then this idea that she brushes it away with impatient fingers, so she's also not happy about the events, but she's not complaining about it like the old man is. And this idea of hoping with a sort of desperate interest for some ray of light potentially suggests again that obviously she feels uncomfortable in the situation that they are in. So there are lots of quotations you could have picked out of this to respond to the question. Okay, so we're going to have a look at a little model answer next to see how this could feed into a response. So just so you're aware, this is how the mark scheme looks, okay? Now obviously I've not included the whole mark scheme because nobody is going to achieve below a grade 3, okay? So for you to get 6 to 10 marks, which is our aim, okay, they are looking for you to make some evaluative comments on the effect on the reader. So what does it make you think and feel? Some understanding of the writer's techniques used, so if there's a language feature, talk about it. Some evidence of quotations used, so you've got to provide evidence. And then some inference from the quotations, so what are you learning about the characters from those quotations, okay? So that is our aim. To boost it up a little bit further, those some become clear, okay? So it's not about you suggesting something and going off on a tangent, it's about you being clear in the remarks you make. Now, for you to get a grade 4, you need to achieve at least 10 out of the 20 marks, okay? You need to be getting 50% on each question. So you need to be hitting this sum criteria. And here we have a model response, okay? The purple section shows you the sections where they've gained the most marks, okay? And we're going to have a think about why those sections might have gained this student the most marks. So I'm going to read it out to you, make sure you're listening carefully, and then we're going to talk through these purple sections. So, I agree with the statement to a certain extent, as despite describing the appearance of one of the characters, the author only scrapes the surface about each other one and their current actions. The old fellow, who had kept up a constant complaint, is portrayed first. He is clearly very on edge and is a character not afraid to voice his opinion, as he hurls abuse at the driver, cursing him in a high, petulant voice. The fact that the author describes the man's voice as being high-pitched shows he is panicked about the situation, and he is worried for his safety, as a person's voice raising in pitch is a result of that. The word petulant indicates that the man is bad-tempered and sulky like a child, which contrasts with his appearance of being an old fellow. By cursing the driver, he means the man also appears to be ill-mannered. And when he let the window down consequently in bringing in a shower of rain upon himself and his fellow passengers, he is displayed as being inconsiderate to others. This man may feel he holds more importance than the other passengers on the coach, as there are no apologies given for his actions after having thoroughly chilled the interior of the coach. This statement may not just be physically due to the cold weather, but also down to the cold, awkward atmosphere that the man has created inside the bus after his petulant shouts. Additionally, the man mutters into his beard, which is a sign the man is lonely or prefers to be in the presence of just himself rather than others. The fact the man likes to be alone may be why he was so rude to the driver, as he isn't used to human company, especially when he isn't in control of the situation. Neighbouring the man is a jovial red-faced woman in a blue cloak. The woman's red face indicates she is out of breath and may be potentially unfit. This is confirmed when she brought out a great hunk of cake and plunged into it. The woman eats the cake for comfort, and it seems like a natural response when she was burrowing into the depths of a large basket. The woman appears to be used to stressful situations, as she is more calm than the old man and is also sociable and likes to be noticed, sighs heavily. So, obviously thinking back to the previous slide, thinking back to that marking criteria, they wanted you to be able to pick quotations out. They wanted you to be able to discuss what the quotations meant. They wanted you to discuss how they made you feel, and they wanted you to infer some details from it, okay? The purple is the level of inference that this person's gone into, and it clearly shows, you know, the kind of level of thought process that they've got. So if we think about this, so he's clearly on edge as a character, and he's not afraid to voice his opinion. So they're making that inference from the fact that he shouts in a high-pitched voice. The man also appears to be ill-mannered, okay, from the fact that he just lets the window down, okay. He's inconsiderate to others. He feels he holds more important than the other passengers on the coach. He is lonely, or he prefers his own company, which is probably why he's rude to other people, because he's not used to being around them. Where it indicates she's out of breath, she looks to the cake for comfort. That is all inference. It's all things that you've read in. And actually, if we look at the level of quotation in comparison to the level of analysis, there isn't that much, is there, in terms of the quotes. The quotes are a very small part. It's what you say about the quotes that are important, okay? So what you're going to do for the rest of this lesson is have a go at producing your own response. So we're going to move on to the next slide, and I'm just going to explain how that is going to look. So this is how your attempt is going to look, okay? So you have the question here, so you are agreeing with the statement, the writer brings very different characters to life to reader, it is as though you are in the coach with them, okay? You've got to include 3 quotations, and you need to think about what those quotations suggest about the characters. So what do you learn about them from those quotes? You're going to use Peel to help you structure your paragraph. So you always say that you agree with the statement, you have to provide a quotation, and then you need to think about what that tells you about that character, what the writer is emphasising, okay? You should aim for 3 of these in 20 minutes of writing. So you are going to need to flick between this slide and the previous one. Obviously, I'm happy for you to use the previous slide to help you. You can also use the previous slide to that for the quotations. But I'd like everyone to aim to try and write at least 2 paragraphs by the end of this lesson, and I'd like them sending to me. Remember, you also have to complete the Show My Homework quiz at the end of every lesson.